this. Jason?
Yeah, I think from a recruiting perspective, right, compensation is kind of the start of the conversation, but it's not everything. And so going back to some of the points made, right, I think we've all heard the adage, like, people don't leave, like, companies, they don't quit jobs, they quit managers, which by default is they're quitting the culture, right? And so if you've got a toxic culture, a toxic work environment, or, just bad expectations, right, you're going to see people, leave in droves. And so, something that I like to think about and share with, leaders as I'm talking to them at our company is, once we get through the interview process with, a candidate, right, maybe we make them an offer, that interview process is going both ways, right? We're interviewing a candidate, making sure they're a good fit for our company and that they're going to, be successful here, but they're also interviewing us. They're looking at us, hey, how do they stack up against the job that I'm currently at? How is this manager compared to the manager that I'm leaving, right? Where are those similarities? Where are those differences, which might be a bigger factor? And so the better that we can have a strong, welcoming culture, that strong onboarding experience, we're going to see, going back to that retention, right, within that first 30 days and beyond, we're going to see that really solidify, because again, compensation starts the conversation, but I think we've all been in situations where, the compensation isn't everything, but we'd be willing to step away, right, if the right opportunity came, even if it was a little bit of a pay cut. So, again, from a recruiting perspective, it starts the conversation, it's there, it's important to talk about, but I think there's a lot more factors involved that go deeper than that.
Go back to, no, really it's not money, even though they might say it's money. Mike?
Yeah, kind of building off of the culture piece, as Ravneet and Jay said. I think, of course, there's different types of drivers. Some want to just simply make as much money as possible, so they just want as many miles as possible, and that could be a factor there. But other than that, it's certainly the culture, and I think it really boils down to support. Whether or not a driver feels that they have the right support that they need. Drivers face many challenges out on the road and many frustrations, and if they have a team behind them that is helping them solve those problems or deal with those frustrations, if they feel that they have that support, they really feel like they're a member of the team and that the team cares about them and that they're not just a truck number. So, like safety, retention, maintenance, like all the supporting departments, dispatchers as well, operations, if they are taking drivers' concerns or problems seriously and helping them address them and showing that we care to make the effort to help them focus on driving and focus on being safe, and we can help with everything in between. If they feel like there's a lack of that support, I think that's where it's like, okay, I don't want to be here, and they start looking to maybe somewhere else. I can get that support somewhere else.
And then somebody's got something on their mind, they got nothing but miles to think about that issue. So if you can kind of bump into that and keep the conversation going, if you've had a challenge with a driver and they're upset, you're upset, keep the conversation going. And it's not just the recruiting, it's not just the safety. Everybody has a job to do in the recruiting and retention side. What about technology? What role is technology playing in your recruiting and retention? Jace?
Yeah, so from a recruiting perspective, I mean, technology, we all know AI, right, is the new wave. And so we've implemented some cool tools that we use to help with the screening process. And so we've really been leveraging AI from a screening process perspective, right, where we can kind of weed through some of our applicants, especially in those high applicant flow areas, which we all love so much, to make sure that, our recruiters are getting, kind of the best of the best. In other ways, on the other side of the same coin, you'll hear me say that a lot. From a sourcing perspective, we've got some really cool tools, and there's many companies right out there that are really leveraging AI where we can upload a resume, right, whether it's for a driver role or maybe a more senior leadership role, a sales position, and we'll punch that in and it will be analyzed, and then it'll spit out a bunch of candidates based on the resume that we uploaded. So we'll take someone that either we just hired or even a leader that has been successful with the company, with the business, and we'll punch that in and get a bunch of people like them. So there's a lot of different ways that we can leverage, the AI and the technology from a recruiting perspective. Retention-wise, I think we lean more so on, those surveys, right? How are we doing the retention surveys or the stay interviews, where we kind of compile and collect all that data just so that we can review, and again, identify hotspots and react or, proactively address them before we see it become a deeper issue.
So would you have stay